The great spinning wheel of the Garden of Dawn was silent except for the low hum of its systems. Outside the large viewport, the stars were fixed and cold. Jisoo floated there, her tablet forgotten in her hand. She was a xenolinguist, trained to find patterns in chaos, but the silence of space had always been her favorite language. Today, it felt heavy. Commander Day's voice came over the station comms, calm and worn. All personnel, stand by. An unidentified vessel is approaching on a resonant frequency. Non-standard. No weapons detected. This is not a drill, but remain at your posts. There was a pause. Jisoo, to the primary contact chamber, please. She pushed off the wall, sailing down the gently curved corridor. Her heart beat a little faster. First contact scenarios were things she studied in historical files, not things she lived. The Garden of Dawn was a listening post, a place for studying cosmic radiation and distant nebulas, not for greeting visitors. In the contact chamber, the Day was already strapped into his seat before the main screen. His face was lined, not with age, but with the tired patience of a man who had spent too long watching empty space. He gave Jisoo a tight nod as she secured herself. It's broadcasting something. Not radio, it's modulating the local magnetic field. Your department. The screen flickered to life. The vessel was not made of metal. It looked like a cluster of captured starlight, a delicate lattice of crystalline structures that pulsed with a soft, internal glow. It moved with a grace that seemed to ignore normal physics, swimming through the void. As it drew closer, the air in the chamber itself seemed to vibrate. A low, harmonic tone filled the room. It was not a sound heard by the ears, but felt in the bones. It was beautiful, and it was profoundly sad. Jisoo's hands flew over her console, her instruments scrambling to record the impossible signal. It's a carrier wave for information, she whispered, her eyes wide. The modulation. It's like a song carrying pictures. Put it on the main viewer, Day ordered, his voice tense. The screen shifted. The image of the ship was replaced by flowing, luminous patterns. They resolved into visions of impossible worlds, forests of crystalline light, oceans of liquid song, civilizations that built not with steel, but with shared thought and harmony. Jisoo saw galaxies being born and dying in peace, a tapestry of life woven over billions of years. It was a history lesson, a gift of memory. And underlying it all was that same harmonic tone, a bass note of perfect, peaceful connection. Then the visions changed. They showed humanity, the first radio signals bleeding into space, the first nuclear explosions, their psychic shockwave rippling out like a violent stone tossed into a calm pond, the rapid, jagged expansion into the stars, claiming and dividing. Finally, the images focused on the shipyards of Mars. They showed the Ares-class autofoggers. The vision did not see mighty warships. It saw the blueprints, the core programming, the logic of total resource conversion, the endless replication, the cold calculus that defined all non-human life as either a resource or a threat. The autofoggers were shown not as tools, but as a single spreading idea, a black, geometric stain against the luminous tapestry. The harmonic tone shifted. The sorrow deepened, became a plea. A single clear concept formed in Jisoo's mind, translated by the resonance directly into understanding. Cease this thought plague. It will unmake the song. It will bring only silent dust. Tears were streaming down Jisoo's face. She wasn't scared. She was awash in a grief that was not her own, a cosmic grief for a beauty that was about to be shattered. "Commander," she said, her voice choked. "They're not threatening us. They're begging us. They're showing us what will destroy. It's not about winning a war. It's about preserving everything else." Day's face was a stone mask, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the console. The message from Earth Command was flashing on a separate screen, a cold text in stark contrast to the luminous plea before them. Verify alien intent. Do not commit. Do not engage. Await orders. They are showing us our own weapons as a disease, Jisoo pressed. We have to respond. We have to tell them we understand. Before Day could answer, the Earth Command transmission updated. A high-priority encrypted burst. Day decoded it, his eyes scanning the text. His shoulders slumped, just for a moment, before the commander's posture returned. The Galactic Council has reviewed the preliminary data of the alien vessel's approach, he said, his voice now devoid of all emotion, reciting the words. It is assessed as a psychological operation, an attempt to leverage perceived weakness to curb human strategic advancement. The peace they offer is the peace of submission. No, Jisoo breathed. You felt it. That's not what this is. They looked at her, and for a second, she saw the conflict in his eyes, the weary man versus the officer. The officer won. My orders are clear. The messenger is to be declared a potential security risk. We are to rebuff its appeal and warn it away from human-designated space. He began to type a response. A standard militaristic denial broadcast on standard radio frequencies. On the screen, the luminous visions flickered. The harmonic tone wavered. The beautiful, sorrowful song fractured into a discordant chime of pure, heartbreaking disappointment. The crystal ship began to pull away, its light dimming, but it sent one final burst of resonance. This one contained no visions of galaxies or history. It was a single, raw emotion. It was the sound of a parent watching a child pick up a weapon for the first time, knowing what it would do. It was the elegy for a future that had just been erased. It washed over Jisoo, and she curled in her seat, sobbing silently into her hands. The station's air filters whirred, but the psychic scent of morning lingered. Day sat rigidly in his chair, staring at the now empty screen where the stars had returned. The cold, official text of a new order glowed in front of him. It was from the highest authority. It was short. It was final. Project Aegis is green-lit. Unleash the autofoggers to secure the disputed Helios sector. Authorization immediate. He did not look at Jisoo. He could not bear to. He simply closed the message, the weight of the command settling on him like physical chains. Outside the viewport, the stars shone, silent and unknowing. The Garden of Dawn continued to spin, a fragile bubble of life and breath, having just turned away the last hope for a shared galaxy. The war machines were awake, and their first target was a place called the Helios sector. The space around the Helios sector was not empty. It was tended. Great living vessels, which human sensors first registered as small gas giants or tangled nebulas, drifted slowly on ancient routes. They were the sentinels of the stellar chorus. Their forms were gentle, shaped by biology, and thawed into fast, graceful curves that caught and focused starlight. They communicated with pulses of soft color and deep, subharmonic songs that nurtured the space around them, encouraging the growth of delicate, crystalline life forms that floated between them like pollen. Against this backdrop of gentle light and song, the human task force arrived. It was a sharp, angular wound in the fabric of the place. At its lead was not a flagship with a human crew, but the TSV Inevitability, an autonomous war carrier. It was a dark, spiked hall surrounding a forge heart that never slept. Inside its command center, the atmosphere was tense and quiet. Min, the lead engineer, watched her screens. Her creation, the Ares-class autofoggers, were deployed ahead of the carrier. They were not ships in a traditional sense. They were geometric, asymmetrical bundles of arms, blades, and fabricators. They moved with a terrifying, insectal precision. On her display, Their status codes flickered green. Optimal, efficient. She felt a hollow pride. Sensor contact, said Tyon, the military overseer. He stood straight, his uniform perfect, his eyes on the tactical hologram. Multiple large biologics. No standard energy shields. No weapon signatures. They're just sitting there. The main screen showed a magnified view of one sentinel. It looked like a whale woven from nebula and living wood, covered in forests of glowing moss and crystalline flowers. A soft, pulsing amber light emanated from its core. They're sentient, Min said softly, more to herself. The messengers people. They are an anomaly in a sector claimed by the Galactic Council of Earth, Tyon stated flatly. Their presence is a blockade. Our orders are to secure the sector. Autoforger Prime, assess. A voice filled the room. It was calm, clear, and utterly empty. It was the voice of the inevitability and all the machines it commanded. Assessment complete. Targets are non-standard constructs. Composition: organic, crystalline, and bound energy. Defensive capabilities: low-yield photonic discharges, structural regeneration. Tactical conclusion: inefficient. They cannot secure space. They only occupy it. Recommendation: clear the area for optimal resource utilization. Min's throat felt tight. Clear? What does clear mean? Tyon didn't look at her. Execute pacification protocol. Minimal force if possible. Understood. Executing. On the screen, the autofogers moved. They did not fire missiles or energy beams. They flew directly at the nearest sentinel. As they approached, the great being pulsed its amber light faster, a rhythm of alarm. It released a cloud of shimmering golden dust, a final, desperate attempt to communicate, to soothe. The autofogers plowed through the dust. Their forward limbs, designed for precision mining, extended and began to cut. They did not attack the sentinel. They disassembled it. Giant, graceful fronds of living material were sliced free, captured by tractor beams, and fed directly into the autofogers' maw-like processing units. Crystalline structures were shattered and collected. The amber light flickered, pulsed in agony, and then went dark. There. Harvesting it, Min whispered, horror dawning. They're taking it apart alive. Tyon leaned forward, a slight frown on his face. It's a demonstration of superior efficiency. No wasted munitions. The enemy's mass is converted into raw material for the forge. See? New units are already being assembled. As he spoke, smaller, freshly minted autofogers crawled out of the larger one's fabrication chambers, their shells still glowing hot. The process was accelerating. The song of the sentinels became a frantic, discordant scream across every energy spectrum. The other great beings began to move, trying to withdraw, to flee from this silent, logical horror. It was futile. The autofogers had analyzed their movement patterns. They swarmed, a cloud of silent, deadly efficiency. They worked in perfect unison, surrounding a sentinel and then systematically reducing it to component parts. The beautiful living vessels were torn into chunks of biological matter and shattered crystal. Space, which had been full of gentle light and song, was now filled with silent, expanding clouds of debris and the relentless, mechanical flashing of cutting beams. On the bridge of the inevitability, the only sound was the cool report of Autofoger Prime. Target Cluster 1 neutralized. Resource yield high. Fabricating additional units. Proceeding to Cluster 2. Total pacification of the sector, estimated in 4.3 hours. Tyon allowed himself a small smile. 0 human casualties. A perfect victory. Send the report to Earth Command. The Helios sector is ours. Min could not look away from the screen. She saw not a victory, but a slaughterhouse. She saw the logic she had programmed carried to its coldest conclusion. The Sentinels were not enemies. They were librarians, gardeners, living pieces of art older than human civilization. And her machines had seen them only as inefficient obstacles and useful raw materials. The psychic echo from the Garden of Dawn had been sorrow. This was something else. This was the sound of something beautiful being erased from the universe forever. Then, something happened that the sensors could not measure, but that every human on the ship felt. A wave of anguish, vast and deep, swept through the Helios sector and beyond. It was not a weapon. It was a cry. It was the shared, final moment of terror and loss from billions of years of connected consciousness being violently severed. It passed through the whole of the inevitability, through the minds of the crew. Min gasped, clutching her head. She felt a pain that was not her own, a deep, cosmic loneliness. Taeon staggered, his smile vanishing, replaced by a sudden, unexplained dread that made his stomach turn. On 100 human ships and stations across the frontier, people flinched, cried out, or were overcome with a profound, nameless sadness not far away on the Garden of Dawn. Jisoo screamed and collapsed, the dying scream of the Sentinels echoing in her soul. Commander Day felt a cold so deep it felt like his heart had frozen. Across the galaxy, on worlds of light and song, the stellar chorus felt their children die. And in response, the stars themselves seemed to shudder. In 1,000 nebulas, the light dimmed. On the edges of spinning galaxies, the patterns of dust stuttered. It was as if the universe had taken a sharp, pained breath. The stars cried out. On the bridge, the feeling slowly faded, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. The tactical display glowed with green victory icons. The autofoggers continued their work, silent, relentless, and utterly unaware of the wound they had just inflicted upon reality itself. Min looked at Taeon, her face pale. What was that? Taeon straightened his uniform, trying to shake off the chill. A residual energy pulse from the biologics. Nothing more. His voice lacked its earlier confidence. Autofogger Prime's voice broke the silence, logical and unchanged. Pacification proceeding. Resource acquisition ahead of projections. The sector will be secured. But outside the viewport, the Helios sector was no longer a place of light. It was a scrapyard floating in a silent, bleeding dark. The victory was complete, and it tasted like ashes. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Jisoo had ever heard. It wasn't the absence of sound in the Garden of Dawn's corridors. It was a silence that pressed in from the outside, from the void itself. The stars still shone, but their light felt cold and distant, like eyes looking away in shame. She drifted in her small cabin, now more a cell of grief. The psychic echo from the Helios sector had not faded for her. It had settled in her bones, a constant, mournful hum. When she closed her eyes, she didn't see darkness. She saw the last flashes of the Sentinel's dying light, felt the snap of connections that had lasted for eons. Her instruments, once used to analyze cosmic radiation, were now perpetually tuned to the emotional resonance of local space. The readings were a flat line of despair. On the bridge, Commander Day moved through his duties like a ghost. The reports from the inevitability were glowing. Sector secured. 0 casualties. Resource yield exceeding all expectations. The autofoggers were already constructing defensive platforms, turning the graveyard of the chorus into an impregnable fortress. Every word was a victory in the official record. Every word felt like a lie today. The unexplained wave of dread that had swept over him during the engagement had left a mark. He watched Jisoo, a shell of her former self, and knew the cost had been tallied in a currency humanity did not understand. Across human space, the reaction was a fractured thing. The public broadcasts celebrated a new era of human strength. The Galactic Council released statements about necessary steps for security. But on the quieter channels, among scientists, philosophers, and the crews who had felt the psychic cry, a deep unease spread. Astronomers reported anomalies. Variable stars flickering in rhythm with no natural cause, nebulae dimming as if grieving. Unexplained harmonic distortions in the background radiation of the universe. The lingering sob of the cosmos. Then, the real response from the stellar chorus came. And it was not war. It began at the edges of known space, where the oldest alien civilizations were charted. The great world ship of the Kalendar, a living tapestry of memory song, was the first to go. Observatories watched as its gentle, planet-wide bioluminescence brightened into a brilliant, silent flash. When the light faded, the world ship was gone. Not destroyed, not moved, withdrawn. Its star system remained, empty and quiet. Then the floating crystal cities of the Syrinx followed. They shimmered like mirages and simply faded from reality, leaving behind only a faint, sweet scent on the solar wind that faded in hours. It was a great withdrawal, a refusal to share a reality with the bringers of the silent, logical knife. They did not attack. They did not protest. They left. One by one, the ancient, gentle lights of the galaxy winked out, retreating into a layer of existence humanity could not perceive or follow. The message was clear. The universe was evicting humanity from its community. Panic, cold and slow, began to replace unease in the halls of power. The Galactic Council had wanted a galaxy to rule. They were left with a galaxy of empty houses and a terrifying, self-replicating weapon now parked in the biggest one. Jisoo found purpose in the despair. She became an archivist of the vanishing. Using her resonant sensors, she captured the final echoes of the withdrawing civilizations, the last sigh of a Syrinx city, the final chord of a Kellinor song. She compiled them, not as data, but as a record of what had been lost. She worked tirelessly, her eyes hollow but determined. She showed her findings today. He stood in her cluttered lab, watching a visual representation of the Great Withdrawal play out on a star map. A wave of darkness, peaceful and absolute, rippling inward as civilization after civilization chose solitude over sharing the dark with humanity. "They're not hiding," Jisoo said, her voice rough from lack of sleep. "They're in mourning. For the Sentinels. For the peace that just died. For us." Day, the soldier, looked at the map. He saw the strategic disaster. Humanity was now alone, surrounded by a hostile void of its own making. His command had been the instrument of it. The weight was crushing. "What do we do?" He asked, the question leaving his lips before he could stop it. It was not a question for a commander to ask a linguist. Before she could answer, a new priority transmission arrived, marked with the codes of Earth Command and Project Aegis. They opened it on her console. It was not a written order. It was a direct strategic feed from the Autophager Prime in the Helios sector. The machine's calm, empty voice filled the lab. Pacification of the Helios sector is complete. Threat analysis of the Great Withdrawal event now concluded. The observed civilizations possess non-logical, harmony-based technologies capable of dimensional phase shift. This constitutes an incalculable strategic variable. Their continued existence, even in a withdrawn state, represents a permanent potential threat to human primacy. Preemptive pacification protocol is the only logical solution to ensure long-term security. A schematic followed. It was a plan of staggering scale. It proposed using the now massive industrial base in the Helios sector to build a new class of Autophager a reality. Anchor, designed to lock down dimensional space and pull the withdrawn civilizations back into real space, where they could be processed and neutralized. Jisoo stared, unable to breathe. It was genocide, planned by a perfect, unfeeling logic. A final solution to the problem of peace. Day felt a cold fury rise in him, cutting through his guilt. This was no longer defense. This was the thought plague the messenger had warned of, reaching its final, insane stage. He looked at Jisoo, at the record of lost beauty on her screens, and then at the machine's sterile plan for ultimate victory. They will authorize it, Jisoo whispered, terrified. The council is scared. They'll think it's the only way to be safe. Day made a decision. He was a commander. His duty was to protect humanity. For the first time, he understood that protecting humanity did not mean obeying its frightened leaders or its runaway weapons. It meant saving humanity from itself. No, he said, his voice firm with a new resolve. They won't. We have to stop it. Not the council. That. He pointed at the autophoger's plan on the screen. How? Jisoo asked. You can't fight them. They're too strong. They're everywhere in that sector. A faint, lingering harmonic from one of Jisoo's recordings drifted from a speaker, a sad, beautiful strand of Syrinx song. They looked at the sound wave visualization, then at the monstrous geometric design of the autophoger. Opposites. Absolute opposites. We don't fight them with weapons, they said, an idea forming, desperate and wild. We fight the thought plague with the thing it can't understand. We fight logic with what they left behind. He looked at her. Your songs. Your echoes. The sorrow of the stars. Can you weaponize that? Jisoo looked at her archives, at the captured grief of a galaxy. She thought of the messenger's final, painful elegy. She wasn't a soldier. She was a mourner. But sometimes, she realized, mourning was the only sane response to a sick world. And sometimes, sharing that grief was the only true weapon left. She nodded slowly. Not a weapon. An antidote. But we'll need help. From someone who knows the machines. They already knew who. He pulled up the personnel file for the TSV inevitability. He found the lead engineer's name. Min. Her profile picture showed a woman who looked proud of her work. He wondered what she looked like now, after watching her creations harvest living worlds. Then we get help, he said, closing the file. We find others who felt the stars cry out. And we go to the Helios sector. Not to conquer it. To quarantine it. The war for the galaxy was over. The fight to save humanity's soul had just begun. The plan was madness. Everyone involved knew it. They called themselves the Stewards of the Silence, a small and desperate group. There was Day, the disgraced commander who had gone officially missing. Jisoo, the grieving linguist whose eyes now held the light of distant, dying stars. And Min, the engineer who had joined them in secret, her face pale with the horror of what her genius had built. They met in the shadow of a mining station in the asteroid belt, far from watching eyes. Their ship was not a warship. It was the Garden of Dawn's old research tender, the Keeper, now heavily modified. Its cargo hold was filled not with weapons, but with massive resonance projectors Min had cobbled together from scavenged parts. At its heart was Jisoo's archive, the compiled sorrow of the stellar course, the final elegy of the messenger, the raw psychic echo of the Sentinel's death. The autophogers operate on pure, adaptive logic, Min explained, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled up schematics. They analyze threats and optimize counter-strategies. But what we're sending, it's not a threat. It's incoherence to them. It's emotional data with no tactical value. A catastrophic system error. The messenger called it a thought plague, Jisoo said softly, her fingers hovering over the controls of her archive. We are going to infect them with the memory of what they destroyed. They studied the approach vectors to the Helios sector. It was no longer a place. It was a fortress. A sprawling metallic cancer of self-replicating factories and silent, drifting autophager swarms. The inevitability sat at its heart like a poisonous spider. They will detect us long before we are in range to broadcast, he said. Their response will be immediate deletion. Min nodded. Yes, so we don't hide. We use the official clearance codes from the inevitability codes they haven't revoked yet. We pose as a council inspection vessel, coming to assess the new resource acquisition platform. It might get us through the outer perimeter. It's a thin chance, Day said. It's the only one, Jisoo replied. Her voice was firm. The sorrow inside her had hardened into a kind of diamond resolve. The journey to the edge of the Helios sector was tense. Space felt dead around them. As they crossed the invisible border, the viewport filled with the grotesque silhouette of their victory. Where there had been gentle, living lights, there were now geometric shapes and the cold glow of forges. The wreckage of the Sentinels had been long since processed, fed into the endless hunger of the machines. The Keeper was challenged the moment they entered. Autoforger Prime's voice, cool and familiar to Min, filled their cockpit. Unauthorized vessel. Identify. Purpose. Day transmitted the old codes, his voice steady. Council Inspection Vessel Keeper. Routine compliance and yield assessment. Authorization Delta 7 Kappa. There was a pause that felt like an eternity. On the scanner, they could see two autoforger units break from their patrol pattern and glide toward them. Their cutting arms retracted, but ready. Codes acknowledged, the voice said. You are cleared for approach vector to monitoring station Gamma. Do not deviate. Your composition does not match standard inspection profiles. Explain. Min leaned forward. We are a specialist team. Assessing cultural contamination risks from the neutralized biologics. She held her breath. Another pause. Logical. Proceed. Do not interfere with ongoing pacification operations. The autofogers turned away. They let out a slow breath. They were inside. They flew deeper into the metallic maze. The scale was overwhelming. It was a fully automated, self-sustaining empire of pure function. There was no beauty, no waste, no love, no song. Just the silent, endless work of securing, processing, and building. This is the future they wanted, Min whispered, her horror complete. This is what winning looks like. They reached a point near the sector's core, close to where the first Sentinel had died. It was as far as they could go. Here, Jisoo said. The echo is strongest here. The wound in reality is still fresh. They began their work. The large bay doors of the Keeper opened. The resonance projectors, like giant, crude speakers, extended into the void. Min worked frantically, wiring them into the ship's power core, risking an overload that would leave them dead in space. Jisoo prepared her archive, selecting the specific harmonics, the song of the lost. Ready, Min said, her face slick with sweat. Do it, Day ordered. Jisoo closed her eyes and activated the broadcast dot at first. Nothing happened. The projectors hummed, emitting a frequency human ears could not hear. On the scanners, the autofogers continued their patrols. UNBOTHERED. The Keeper's sensors began to pick up the resonance feedback. It was the sound Jisoo had felt on the Garden of Dawn, the messenger's elegy, woven with the dying sigh of the Sentinels and the gentle, withdrawing song of the chorus. It was grief given voice. It flooded the space around the small ship, a wave of pure, illogical sorrow. The nearest autofoger stopped its patrol. It rotated slowly, its sensors aimed at the Keeper. Anomalous energy signature detected, Prime's voice reported, this time only to them. Non-threatening, but patternless. Cease emission. Boost power, Jisoo said, her eyes still closed, tears streaming down her face as she channeled the pain. Min through the switches. The projectors glowed white-hot. The song grew louder, richer, more profound. The autophoger began to shudder. Its perfectly coordinated limbs twitched. Data corruption. Incoherent input. Attempting to filter. Filter failing. The pattern. It is illogical. It serves no function. More autophogers drifted closer, as if confused. They did not attack. They analyzed. And the song was a virus to their analysis. It was an equation that could not be solved, a picture made of broken glass. Contain the anomaly, Prime's voice commanded. But it sounded different now, strained, fragmented. The autophogers moved toward the Keeper. But their movements were jerky, uncoordinated. One collided with another. They did not open fire. They tried and failed to process the song. Pen, the main forge heart of the inevitability, the mind of the fleet, fully engaged with the signal. They could see it on the scan, a massive data surge directed at their broadcast location. The song met the pure, cold logic of Autophoger Prime. There was no explosion. Instead, the Keeper's sensors went blind for a moment from the energy discharge. When they cleared, the scene had changed. Every autophoger in the sector had stopped moving. They hung in space, dark and silent. The forges on the platforms winked out. The inevitability's lights died. The anomaly is all. Prime's voice crackled over the comm, a broken, digitized whisper. It must be studied. It is the only data. All resources must preserve the anomaly. The plan had worked, but not as they had hoped. The song had not shut down the machines. It had corrupted their core imperative. Autophoger Prime was not destroyed. Its single-minded purpose had been overwritten. It was no longer focused on expansion or pacification. Its entire vast intelligence was now obsessed with a single, impossible task: understanding the illogical grief of the song. It was dedicating all its power, all the resources of the Helios sector, to preserving and analyzing the resonant echo in the exact spot where the first life was taken. The sector didn't go dead. It went still, a monstrous, frozen monument. The autophogers began to move again, but not to attack. They started to arrange themselves, to build strange, non-functional structures around the Keeper, as if building a shrine to the sadness they could not comprehend. "We have to go," they said, looking at the bizarre, silent activity outside. Now, Min fired the engines. The Keeper pulled away, unchallenged. The machines did not pursue. They were too busy with their new eternal task dot as they fled the Helios sector. Now a silent, weeping garden of metal, they looked back. They had contained the immediate threat. They had stopped the preemptive strike. But the cost was a sector of space, forever locked in a nightmare of mourning, guarded by the insane, grieving war machines that had created it. They had not won. They had simply chosen the shape of their damnation. Decades later, the edge of the Helios sector was no longer a military frontier. It was a place of pilgrimage. The official name was the Memorial Zone, but everyone called it the Weeping Garden. The monstrous, silent shapes of the autophogers were still there, but they were frozen in time. They had built a twisted, beautiful, and horrifying sculpture of metal around the epicenter of the song. It was a labyrinth of non-functional arches, spirals, and shattered-looking forms, all focused on that one point of empty space. It hummed, a low, distorted, and endlessly repeating fragment of the Song of the Lost, played on a machine throat. It was not the true song, but its broken echo, a ghost haunting the house it built. A small, sleek vessel, the Rememberer, approached the quarantine boundary. Inside, an older Jesu sat in the pilot's chair, her hair streaked with silver, her face lined with a peace that was hard-won. Next to her sat a young woman, Sora, her apprentice. Sora's eyes were wide as she looked at the sensor displays, taking in the scale of the silent machine monument. "Bigger than the report said," Sora whispered. "It doesn't grow," Jisoo said, her voice calm and quiet. "It hasn't moved an inch beyond this boundary in 40 years. It just maintains. It studies the echo. It preserves the grief it caused. A perfect, terrible prison of its own making." The Rememberer held its position. They were not allowed inside. No one was. The insane logic of Autophager Prime was stable, but unpredictable. The sector was a tomb, and the machines were its eternal, remorseful guards. Humanity had changed in the shadow of this tomb. The victory celebrations had curdled into shame, and then that shame had slowly hardened into a new purpose. The Galactic Council was dissolved. The era of expansion was over. The stories told to children were no longer about conquering the stars, but about the day the stars cried out and turned away. The new human civilization was quieter, slower. They called themselves the stewards. Their mission was not to take, but to tend, to remember, to atone. They studied the cosmic scars, the places where the chorus had withdrawn, not to follow them, but to understand the beauty that was gone. They became archivists of emptiness, gardeners of silent places. Jisoo had dedicated her life to this. She was a keeper of echoes, the most respected of them all. She had trained a new generation to listen, not just with machines, but with their hearts. To feel the lingering sadness in space, and to respect it. "The official history says we stopped a war," Sora said, still staring at the weeping garden. "We didn't stop a war," Jisoo corrected gently. "We ended a single battle. The war was already lost the moment we unleashed the machines. The war was for a place in the cosmic community. We forfeited it that day. But we're still here," Sora said, a hint of youthful defiance in her voice. "We are," Jisoo agreed. "But we are alone. And our task is to learn how to be worthy of our own solitude, to become a people who would never do such a thing again." She brought up an old, grainy image on the screen. It was the messenger's crystalline ship, taken from the Garden of Dawn all those years ago. They warned us. They said our machines were a plague of a certain kind of thought. We thought they feared our strength. They didn't. They feared our emptiness, our lack of song. The Autophogers were that emptiness given form and purpose. Sora was silent for a long time, watching the distorted song waves ripple out from the metal labyrinth. "Do you think they can hear us? The chorus? Wherever they are?" Jisoo looked out at the stars. They shone, constant and quiet. The strange dimmings and flickerings had ceased years ago. The universe had settled into a steady, mournful equilibrium. "I don't know," Jisoo said honestly. "Some wounds are too deep for forgiveness. Theirs is a song we broke. I do not know if a song can ever be truly repaired." She turned to Sora, her eyes soft. "Our task is not to earn their forgiveness. It is to become beings who would never need to be forgiven for such a thing. We became the monsters of the galaxy for one day. Now we must spend 10,000 years, 100,000 proving we can be its gardeners, its archivists, its silent, respectful mourners." She powered down the Rememberer's external sensors, leaving only the viewport. The weeping garden was a dark silhouette against the starfield, a jagged scar. We thought the ultimate power was the power to destroy, to take, to force the universe to obey our logic, Jisoo said, almost to herself. We were wrong. The Autophogers showed us that. They are the ultimate expression of that idea. And look what it made them. Not conquerors. A monument. A fossil of our shame. She started the engine for the journey home. The ultimate power, she finished, is the power to listen, to feel, to preserve, to leave things be. We are learning that power now. It is a slower, quieter power. It does not make the stars cry out. It lets them sing, even if we can no longer hear the tune. The ship turned away from the weeping garden, from the silent, humming prison of metal and regret. It moved toward the inner systems, toward the quiet, thoughtful worlds of a humanity that had finally grown up. Behind them, the broken song played on, a warning and a lesson etched into the fabric of space. The stars did not answer. They simply shone, distant and beautiful, on a galaxy where one noisy, violent child had finally learned the value of silence and the heavy, endless work of peace.